Hi, my name is Jake. I was looking for a roommate for the last 2 weeks, and finally I found one. I found it so hard to pay the rent on my own, so I was so thankful for the bill to be cut in half. I loved going to parties and having fun, and letting myself go every chance I could get. My roommate Simon prefers to stay in and work on his art. He goes to art college just like myself. He just sits all day painting. Sometimes I think he doesn't even eat. I was trying to get to sleep one night, and he was over by his bed with his bed lamp on, painting and sobbing. I asked him what was wrong. He told me he had no idea what he could paint to get the marks he needed for an upcoming exam. I wasn't any good at giving advice, but I tried my best. I walked over to him and said, "Look man, don't get too upset over it. Just do what you do, put your blood, sweat and tears into it." He said to me then, "I hope they like it, whatever it is I do." Then he said something weird. He asked me, why was it that whenever artists died, their work was appreciated much more? I didn't know what to say, so I just told him I didn't know. The next day, I was going out to a party. It was Friday, and I asked him did he want to go. He said to me no, and told me he has a good idea to get his work noticed, and said he was taking my advice and putting his blood, sweat and tears into it. I smiled at him, wishing him good luck. At about 3 a.m, I came into my room, very quiet not to wake him. I put on my bedside light, and what I saw on the wall made me nearly collapse with fright. There was writing written in blood on the wall. It said, "Thanks for your advice." Simon was lying dead underneath what was a painting of what looked like a forest, but it was painted in his blood. The blood was still dripping from the canvas. I froze in fear, thinking back to me telling him to put his blood, sweat and tears into it, and remembered him asking why were artists' work appreciated more after they died. A couple of minutes later, I rang the police and explained to them, and I waited for them to come. Me and my friends were having an awesome New Year's Eve party. I started speaking to a girl called Krista when things started getting a bit weird. We were alone in a room, and she started speaking about New Year's resolutions. She looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you know where the dark goes when the light comes on? Do you know where the light goes in the dark?" I never heard these questions before, and just smiled at her and said, "I guess it disappears. I don't know." Then she said to me, "What if it was still here?" I asked her, "What do you mean? What if what was still here?" "The light," she said. "What if the light was still here when it was dark? And where would the light go in the dark?" She kept talking about dark and light, so I stood up and walked out of the room and said, "Nice to meet you, Krista. Let's go outside. It's nearly midnight. We don't want to miss the fireworks." I walked out to a group of my friends, excited, waiting for the fireworks. Krista came up to me again. She looked very serious and said in a serious tone, "You won't like it when you find out the answer." I asked her, "What do you mean?" She turned around and walked away. 5 minutes later, my friends lit the fireworks and everyone cheered until suddenly everything changed when a firework backfired into my stomach. I looked down and could see the fire burning in my stomach as I was screaming in pain. A few days later, when I was recovering in the hospital, a nurse walked into the room. When I saw who it was, I froze. It was Krista. She looked down at me and said, "I told you that you wouldn't like where the light goes when it's dark." I was sitting at home one night scrolling through different social media platforms and then decided to take a selfie from my Instagram account. But what I saw when I checked the photo was something totally unexplainable. I was looking at the photo to see did it come out right, and when I looked next to it, I could see a photo of me sleeping in my bed. I couldn't understand how it got there, and I felt a shiver run up my spine. Whoever took this photo had to have been in my house, on my phone, to take that photo. The weirdest thing is, I live alone. That night, I set up a hidden video camera to film myself in my room while sleeping. I was afraid to go to sleep. I found it very hard to fall asleep, but finally I did. Suddenly, I heard a bang at the window and awoke, thinking it must be an intruder. But when I went over to the window, there was a bird outside which must have banged against my window. My wife died last year in a car accident, and whenever I see a bird like that, I think it's her looking out for me. I looked at the clock. It was 2:30. I put off the alarm as I wanted to sleep in. The next day I was looking through the video and a cold shiver ran up my spine. Just before 2:30, I was sitting up on my bed asleep, holding a knife, and was just about to stab myself when the bird hit the window, causing me to drop the knife and fall down on the bed and then wake up instantly. I couldn't believe my eyes. But now I know that when I see a bird hovering around me, I know it's my wife watching over me. Let me tell you a story that happened to me one night, and there are others to confirm it also. It was just an ordinary night shift. I normally like working on night shift because I am a bit of a night owl, so I don't mind staying up late at night. But one night things became really strange, and what I mean by strange is an understatement. I mean extraordinarily strange. You will see as you watch the story. Let me start at the beginning. It was a Friday night and I was working the night shift in my local hospital. I was just relaxing in the reception, reading a great book, when suddenly a man burst in the door. He was carrying a woman and shouted, "Help! Help! I saw this woman on the road. She's about to have a baby." I said, "Sir, who is this woman? I need to put her details into the system, but don't worry, we will get her to the labour ward right away." A few minutes later, the lady was put on a stretcher and put into the labour ward. She kept screaming and screaming. The man didn't know who she was, as he just picked her up on the road and the doctors and nurses couldn't get anything out of her. Suddenly, a photograph fell out of the woman's hand, and it was of her and another woman. There was the name Claire Jackson on the back. I heard them say her name, and out of curiosity and trying to solve the mystery of who the woman was, I researched her. Claire was taken away from her mother due to her mother suffering from delusions of being the Messiah to a Dark Lord. She was taken away into the asylum, rambling about a satanic ritual performed to summon a Dark Lord that would be born on November 22nd. I froze when I read that date, as I was reading that article exactly on November the 22nd. Suddenly the screaming grew louder. I ran into the labour ward, and the lady had given birth. The whole hospital got covered in a dark mist. The woman stopped screaming and gave a sinister smile, and the baby looked up at us with bright, red, evil-looking eyes that shone through the dark mist. Now that I've told you the story, let me tell you the weirdest, strangest thing. That woman walked out of the hospital that night with her baby and was never to be seen again. We checked CCTV footage and we were all around the bed where the woman was, but the baby and woman weren't anywhere to be seen on any of the CCTV footage. But we know what we saw, and we know that we didn't imagine it. How could so many of us have imagined it? But the question I ask is, if that baby is a Dark Lord, when will it make its presence known? Every day I worry that the room I'm in will get covered in that black mist. Thanks for coming along to another session, Mike. I wanted to speak to you about what is really getting under your skin today. I am going to try to get to the bottom of whatever it is, and we will be able to speak about whatever is bothering you and try to find out what the biggest fear you have or the biggest worry. We will really dig into your psyche and try to uncover secrets to make you feel much better in whatever you're going through and whatever is worrying you, whether it's worry over money or relationship or guilt. Are you feeling comfortable? Is there anything I can get you? A glass of water? Maybe another cup of coffee? Yep, a cup of coffee would be great, please, thanks. Joe made some coffee and laid the cup on the table in front of Mike. Mike took a drink of coffee and then relaxed in his seat for his counselling session. So Mike, first I want to ask you, what do you think is making you feel uncomfortable this month? Well, to be honest, I feel like I'm trying my best to better my life, in work etc. And I'm putting my work before my home and my wife and kids etc. I mean, by the time I get home at night, my kids are already in bed, and I hardly ever take my wife out. Sometimes I feel like maybe if I made less money and had more time with my family, I would be so much happier. Well, Mike, I can see where you're coming from, but it's my job to make you unravel whatever is worrying you. So Mike, let's start at the start. You mentioned you're working too hard to spend time with your family. Could you explain more? Is that all it is? You working long hours to not spend time with your wife? Or is there something else? Well, yes, that's it basically, and I wish I had more time with my family to spend with my wife and kids. That is one of the main reasons I came to see a counsellor. Oh Mike, I'm glad you came to see a counsellor, as I will tell you what you should do. You should be honest with your wife and kids. You should be loyal. Mike was getting a bit anxious. Joe kept talking. See, Mike, what good is it you coming to counselling if you don't take note of the counsellor? You shouldn't be disloyal now, should you? Joe looked confused and said, That's okay, I just wanted to try it out as an experiment when you were so adamant you thought it would be a good idea to see what things would feel like if our roles were reversed. But I am your counsellor, so let's just keep it that way, please. Mike gave a sinister smile and said, Oh no, but you see, Mr. Counsellor, I was enjoying playing the role of a counsellor because I was just getting to the root of your problem, which as a matter of fact I just found out last week from reading my wife's text messages is my problem also. Joe stood up and said, Mike, our session is over, and to be honest, I'm sorry, but I think you might have to get a different counsellor. Mike said, No, Mr. Counsellor, I have finally discovered how to ease my pain. See, now that I know that you are having an affair with my wife, I just need to make that stop. Mike pulled out a gun and pointed it to Joe. Joe jumped in fright and said, Mike, I'm so sorry. I will never see your wife again. Trust me, you have to trust me. Mike said, Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? You always used to tell me, trust my wife, when I told you I was worried she was cheating. Well, I can't trust her, can I? And I shouldn't, should I? So I need to get rid of the problem. I need to get rid of you. Mike shot his counsellor in his head.